Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Green Futures 2022. My name is Simon Fisher. I'm privileged to be your chairman for today. This is the first webinar of two in this year's Green Futures programme. Whilst regrettably we're not able to actually hold events and to physically attend, we do have nearly 200 people booked into today, so that's a tremendous turnout. Before I outline the agenda this afternoon, a few housekeeping points to go through. The webinar will run to 2:15, which is the time I will draw stumps. We will have about 15 or 20 minutes at the end for questions. We will not be able to guarantee if we can cover all of the questions, as we anticipate quite a lot, but please do use the chat function on your Zoom screens. And you also need to watch out for some audience polls from some of our speakers. Basis and Noroso points are available from this webinar, and a slide at the end will give you the registration details for your online accounts. Webinar 2 in this is in 1 week's time on the 8th of February. That event focuses on elms into 22. We've got some high-level Defra speakers looking at sustainable farming incentive and local nature recovery components of elms. And it's a really good opportunity to get up to speed on what elms is looking like at the moment. If you do want to attend, then make sure you're booked in for that, as it has a separate registration to this event we're in now. That's the housekeeping dealt with. This Green Futures 22 event is themed Water in the Environment. We have speakers from the Environment Agency who will be covering nutrient planning and management, a very topical subject in the light of fertilizer prices, and also the last autumn's EA announcements on Rule 1 in the Farming Rules for Water issue. We look at catchment sensitive farming, expanding the service from for the catchment sensitive farming officers in the region this year, what's in that pipeline, and what is there that farmers can take advantage of. And from our two water companies in the East Midlands, Anglian Water and Severn Trent, their speakers will outline the emerging private funded marketplace for ecosystem services that they are both building on for the future. So it gives me great pleasure to hand over now to Graham Dixie, who's the Senior Environment Officer for Agriculture in the East Midlands, and his colleague Selina Pass, who is an Environmental Officer in the Lincolnshire and Northamptonshire Land and Water team. Over to you, Graham.
Thank you very much, Simon, for that introduction. That's very kind of you. As Simon said, and I hope you can all hear me, we are talking about nutrient efficiency in these interesting times. And thanks everybody for joining, despite the sun being out for a change. So today we're going to focus on helping you to improve your environment and also try and adapt to some of the changing payments that are going to be affecting you all, as I'm sure you're all aware. So we're going to talk about tackling the extensive and exceptional bagged fertilizer prices we've got at the moment, whilst hoping to look at some ways of enhancing soil and water protection. Then there'll be a quick update about the new Defra EA Agricultural Regulation Task Force and the officers who are out doing the work. And finally, my colleague will also have a quick talk with you about resource efficiency and waste. So as we all know, nitrogen fertilizers exploded recently, back end of last year, mostly down to the natural gas prices, which have rocketed through global demand. So that's been because of COVID and also other economic pressures. And also now we've got a geopolitical situation going on the eastern side of Europe, which also may affect gas prices further. Natural gas is the main element used to make ammonium nitrate, both here and in Europe and most parts of the world now. So it is causing volatility. The prices might increase further. There is potential for it to drop back a bit, but it is expected to remain high for the foreseeable future. And unfortunately, we can't see into the future, so we need to try and tackle what it is now. So there's just a couple of tables here I just wanted to highlight to you from AHDB, just showing really how much increase there's been in the prices just over the previous year or so. 182% increase in the price of homemade ammonium nitrate, even more for imported material. And as we go down that list, pretty much every form of manufactured fertilizer has seen a 100 or 200% increase or thereabouts. And over on the right hand side, we can see that graphically, back end of 2020 all the way through last year and into this year, there's been a skyrocket in the price. So you need to look at your fertilizer requirements again and the options available to mitigate some of these costs that we're seeing. So really, it could be an opportunity to exploit maybe something like organic manure as an alternative to your bagged fertilizers, and also embrace the sustainable farming incentive that's come in this year. So there is a change in payment landscape. As you probably all know, last year was the kick-off point for the 7-year transition from the EU-based rules to payments linked to farmers and landowners improving environment, animal health and welfare, as well as reducing your own carbon footprints. And this ties back into the Defra 25-year environment plan. So basic payment scheme is on a downward spiral down to, as far as we know now, 2027, where payments will cease. Agri-environment schemes are closing as we know them, making way for new environmental payments. Quick table there, where we are with BPS at the moment. So if you're claiming up to £30,000, there will be a 20% reduction this year in your payments. And by 2024, that's going to be 50%. And for those guys and girls who are on more than £155,000 claims, it's going to be a 40% reduction this year and 70% next year. So instead, you'll now be rewarded for providing public goods such as clean and plentiful water, which is one of the areas that obviously the Environment Agency is interested in. There will be grants and other mechanisms to help you with this and increase your income and productivity. So it's now time to try and maybe look at some of the positives out there. And there's probably no better time really to consider these alternatives to bag fertiliser. And one of those is organic manures, which include cattle, pig and poultry farmyard manure and slurries, which we're probably all aware of. There's also treated sewage products from your sewage undertakers, anaerobic digestate products as anaerobic digestion increases in the country, permitted waste products, and also green composts. And it's interesting to see that cattle fertilisers have doubled in value in the last 2 years, and some recent AHDB data was looking at a potential saving of over £450 per hectare in fertiliser costs for every 40 tonnes of farmyard manure applied, which isn't to be sniffed at. So time for the first poll, everybody. It is anonymous, so please do have your fingers on the buttons. It's a yes and no, and it's: do you sample or plan to have all your farmland sampled for nutrients before 2023? We'll just give you a minute or so to have a think about that. Okay, hopefully we have some results now. So 55 of you have said yes. So 77% are you planning to have your soil sample before 2023. 23% you haven't. Okay, that's fair enough. If we could move on now, we'll move on to the next poll. which is regarding soil sample results. So if you are having them sampled, there's 4 options here. Fire away which one you think describes you best. So first one is, I'm totally baffled, to be honest, so don't use them. I don't understand them. I use a facts agronomist to decipher them for my nutrient planning. Third option is, I understand them and work with my facts agronomist to plan my nutrient use. And number 4, I fully understand them and or I am facts qualified. So again, if you'd like to all fire away on those ones. And when we have the polls in, if you could just show the results, that would be great. Okay. So 40% of you understand them and are working with your facts agronomists, which is good. 20% of you are a bit baffled and 20% of you don't understand them. So that's fair enough. I think that's a fairly useful guide. So yeah, thank you for that poll. Of course, one thing you do need to understand is that under farming rules for water, you do need to sample your soils at least once for every field that you cultivate every 5 years. So 2023 is the cut-off for that first 5 years, which I put that date in. It's just a reminder to people to get your soil sampling done. So just back to the alternatives to bag fertilizer, organic fertilizers, and some of the benefits. They're a great soil conditioner. They're great for helping improve structure and soil drainage. They're great for soil organic matter. They increase the soil biology, which again helps improve soil structure and drainage. So we all love to see an earthworm, don't we? They're great little animals to have tootling around under your feet. And also increase soil water retention, which we have to think about in terms of resilience against climate change. And there is some help out there now in terms of the Sfi payments. So 2 tables here for those people with grass on the left. We have an improved grassland soils standard coming out now. Currently there'll be two levels that you can apply for. The introductory base level will pay you £28 per hectare to have your soil organic matter tested, undertake a soil management plan and assessment, stuff that you may have done before under different regimes, and also maintain 95% green cover over the winter. If you want to go one step further, you can maybe establish and maintain herbal lays on at least 15% of your land. And we have a person on the line today, Bob Marsden, who's really into herbal lays. He's a great person to talk to if you want to explore that further. Over on the right, payment rates for arable and horticultural soil standards, a little bit lower on the payment rates, but again, soil testing for soil organic matter, soil assessment and management plans, maintaining 70% winter cover crop to protect your soils, and applying organic manure in any form to at least 1/3 of your land in each year, and that can include sown green cover crops. And again, if you want to take it one step further, then there's the options for multi-species green cover. And something else to think about there for you, you're actually getting some incomes to help improve your soils and also tackle diffuse pollution at the same time. And next year, 2023, there's going to be a new standard, all being well, for nutrient planning. So on to poll number 3. On that last point, do you plan to take up the SFI soil standard option this year? Again, this is helping to offset some of your other soil soil sampling costs. So it's not a bad thing to be thinking of. Okay, if we could just have the results for that up, that would be great when you're ready. Okay, so we're 49.51 on that one. So it's encouraging to see people are thinking about that one. So thank you for undertaking that poll for us. So a few things to remember if you are thinking of using organic manures. You do need to be careful when how you manage them. So there are problems that can occur around runoff and leaching. They can be a big problem if you get it wrong. So we really don't want nitrate, phosphate, and your best bits of your topsoil in the watercourse if we can help it. It causes eutrophication of the watercourses. It also smothers breeding grounds for insects and fish. And of course, it's stuff that you've spent money putting on your field, so it's best to keep it there if you can. And in terms of groundwater pollution, nitrate is a big issue in most areas in the East Midlands, and that impacts on drinking water and the cost of actually cleaning it up, which again, we all pay for eventually, don't we, when we turn the tap on. So it does require careful planning, timing, and the method of application. And in many instances, you will need suitable storage to ensure maximum benefits can be taken. So you do want it now where you need to spread it. There are rules around that, and the Environment Agency are here to help with that one if you need any guidance. And of course, you need to consider the compliance with the regulations such as MVZs and farming rules for water. I think really good nutrient management is probably the key to using organic successfully. So maximising the nutrient and crop efficiency, managing your costs, and that includes, alternating away from the bag fertilizer issues that we've got, and in the long run helping to reduce pollution. But it's not a new concept, this. Nutrient planning has been around for a long time, and I had a look recently. The Code of Good Agricultural Practice for farming, even back in 1985, was talking about when to and when not to apply manures and fertilizers to land. So good nutrient management also helps good soil management and soil health, as we've already discussed. It does require careful planning and application, but there are many tools available out there to help you. So there's the Nutrient Management Guide, originally known as RB209, which is hosted by AHDB. They're all downloadable off their website. There's also Tried and Tested, which is a great little document to help you work out what you need to put on your land and when to put it on, and for you to document that. And then there's also, for the more computer savvy people, Planet and Manna NPK. So one final poll, just around the upcoming nutrient management standard option. It's a yes or no one, ever so quick. Are you considering taking up SFI nutrient management standards in the future? Obviously, we don't know about payments yet for that, but it does seem a good idea to be able to get some money for actually doing this. So if you want to fire away, please, that'd be great. Right, it'd be interesting to see the results. Okay, that's encouraging. 69% of you are thinking of taking that payment and stand it up. So that's really good news. So we do need to wait on the actual intricacies of it, but we'll find out hopefully in the next 6 months or so what that's going to involve. So thanks for that, and I'll move on to my last slide now. So just a quick reminder about timing. So to maximise your fertiliser efficiency, and that includes bag fertiliser of course as well, is to move towards a spring application. And at the end of the day, you know, would you put bag fertiliser on in the winter? Probably not. So why would you put, you know, organic fertiliser on at that time of year too? So you need to be put it on in the spring, which is mostly when your crop and grass is going to need it. There's the recognised leading reference out there, the Nutrient Management Guide, to help you understand and get the best out of your fertilisers. Do remember that autumn spreading isn't banned, despite what you might have read in the press. Where allowed, you can apply just the recommended quantities, and again, I'll refer you back to the old RB 209 document. In terms of cereal crops, only oilseed rape requires an autumn seed bed nitrogen application. Grasses don't need it, even if it greens up. It's only using a very small amount of nitrogen. It's more of a reaction to that. It's not actually helping the crop grow. It does need a rest in the winter. And again, ensure you have adequate and legal storage. And I say, if you are thinking of that or worried about that, do get in touch with us. We are here to help and give you advice and guidance on that. And of course, remember, there are regulations out there that you need to adhere to, spreading limits and that sort of thing. So I shall now hand over to my colleague Selina Pass, who's now going to talk to you first off about the Agricultural Regulatory Task Force. So over to you, Selina.
Thank you, Graham. I'll just wait until I get control of the slides. Yep, so I'm based in Lincoln North Ants. I'm an environment officer here, and so thank you, I've now got control. So following on from Graham's last point about making sure that your storage is compliant and that you adhere to the regulations. So to support our delivery of regulations, last year we secured £1.2 million of funding from the government, and that's gone to recruit 50 new dedicated agriculture regulatory officers. And they are located across England, and they have been located in catchments that have been identified as being high risk from such as things like dairies, for instance. And their job is to deliver approximately 3,000 extra farm inspections within the 18-month period, and this is on top of our usual inspections delivered by people like myself and Graham. And so for Links and North Ants, we've secured 3 officers, and for Graham's area, East Midlands, they have 1 officer. So in Links and North Ants, each officer is being assigned a catchment, and their visits will be initially advice-led. However, where we do recognise non-compliances, we will be providing action plans with deadlines to bring that site back into compliance. All the officers are warranted, as a usual environment officer is, and so they are able to carry out the enforcement actions where that has been recognised, and that will be in line with our standard enforcement and sanctions policy, which is available online for anyone to read. So in my area, the catchments that we prioritise are the Steeping and Oux, the Lower Witham, and the Upper Welland, which is in my area. And we've chosen these catchments based on the drivers that are listed here. So bathing waters would be for catchment 1, chalk streams, and also where agriculture is being recognised as contributing to failure for Water Framework Directive, such as high phosphates. And if you have a poor level of phosphates in your river, it contributes to not reaching the good status it requires. Sorry, I have clicked too much. Let me just go back. So in Graham's area, they'll be looking at the catchments for the River Wye and the Lathkill in the Peak District. And as it says here, the headwater catchment has complex geology and also a mixture of rural and urban developments. And the drivers for these catchments are the drinking water, and I've forgotten now what PP is, drinking water PP protective zones, and also improving catchment understanding, awareness and performance. And their approach would be that they prioritise 8 to 9 farms by the proximity to SSS size, say livestock numbers and density, groundwater vulnerability, and they plan to deliver 24 visits by the end of March this year. So in Links and Northants, the officers will be looking at the usual agricultural regulations, which are listed here, but they'll also be providing advice and guidance to prevent pollution, such as from farmyards, things like your drainage, preventing spills that end up in watercourses. Like, we all know that things like metaldehyde and slug pellets, they get into a drink to the watercourses, and it doesn't take much for something to fail to drinking water directives. The other point that we also will be covering in our area is waste management. So things like your storage, ensuring that if you bring waste onto site, to use things like under an exemption, like backing paper for bedding, that is adhering to the exemptions. And to support that, last year, a new key actions for farms guidance was published. So it's resource efficiency and waste. And this document covers 3 themes, which are listed here: management of resources sustainably, managing waste well, and also protecting livelihoods. And the guidance brings together a mixture of regulations, things like staff vote, farm laws for water, good practice, and also any requirements if you're receiving farm payments. And the idea is it brings benefits to both the environment and the farmers. So for instance, in our area, we are concerned about the waste management, its usage, and its escape into the environment. So the example that I've placed up here is plastics. So things like making sure that your plastic bale wraps are secure and they don't blow into the environment, and that they're recycled through such as a scheme, not buried or burnt. That if you're bringing a waste on, either to spread under an exemption or to use as backing paper, that's not accepted if it has contamination in it. The photograph in the middle is contaminated waste that was spread to land. And also making sure that that you don't allow waste items like your metals and things like this, white goods, build upon your farm. So I've just put some things for maybe to have a look at. So if you have a look in the guidance, it does have lots of links to useful things. So things like applying the waste hierarchy. So that states what you should be looking at for getting rid of waste. So things like disposal should be your last option. There's recovery, there's reuse, there's recycle, and disposal is right at the bottom. There's also things on plastic waste management available and how to save money through reducing waste. There's just a gentle reminder that if you do need exemptions, that you apply for them. They're free online, they last up to 3 years, and that they do have conditions that you just need to make sure that you read and understand and that you comply with. It's also a reminder to have good waste management. So if you're receiving or sending off waste and you require a waste transfer note, filling that in as part of the duty of care. And if you're taking, if somebody's coming to pick up your waste, that they are a registered waste carrier, and you can check online to see if they've got a license. And again, just preventing that waste escaping into the environment in the first place, because once you have plastic, for instance, on a field, the only way to remove it is to litter pick it, and that is very expensive. And obviously we do get it in watercourses as well. So just making sure you have secure storage and that you use proper disposal, and that things like hazardous waste is also kept securely, such as in a cupboard like here. And if you want any more information or chat, as it says here, don't suffer in silence, and that there are mine and Graham's details. So you can contact us. And of course, if there is, and you have an incident or you spot an incident, you can report it to our incident hotline. It's free, and you can do it anonymously as well if that's what you choose to do. So that brings my section to an end. And if we move on, I'm now going to hand over to Bob at the Catchment Centre Farming. Thank you.
Hello, I hope you can all hear me. I will now attempt to do my presentation. So, catchment sensitive farming, that worked, that's good. So today I'm just going to give a really quick run through about catchment sensitive farming, who, what, where and when, and how. So who? Well, I'm Bob Marsden. I'm the River Basin District Coordinator for the East Midlands. And I'm part of a new team of 16 in catchment sensitive farming in the East Midlands region. So what is CSF? Well, you can read it all for yourselves on the screen, but basically we give help, advice and support to farmers to reduce pollution to water and air rather than regulation. So now I'm just going to talk through some of the sort of type of advice we give and some of the events we've run in the past and what we're planning to do in the future. So obviously there's advice ourselves that we give one-to-one between ourselves, our catchment sensitive farming advisors and farmers. But we also run a lot of very well attended events. So this is one we did a few years ago demonstrating slurry injection technology, where we had lots of local agricultural suppliers demonstrate their kit as well. This was called Mini Muck. So you can see the injection tanker there and it being used. Other advice that we've done in the past is we do soil sampling on some farms. And this is quite a typical map that we find when we sample the farms. So you can see the farmstead here, and then the highest concentration of P around the farm, which is index 3 and above, is purple, where it's the easiest way to take slurry from the farm and spray it on the fields. And the further you get away from the farm and the greater distance, you see there's a lot less phosphate. So here on this yellow, it's a 0 indices because very little manure has been applied there in the past. This map then helps farmers to sort of plan their manure applications and slurries to make sure they even up. The aim is to have all these fields in the green optimum level after 2 or 3 years of taking this sampling, which does happen. Where we've got issues of pesticides and catchments, we can also do pesticide training for farmers. So here we've got 12 farmers being trained up on pesticide use and application. Here we see a knapsack sprayer. Other events that we've done is a midsummer evening river walk, looking along the sides of the river to see what invertebrates in the river to assess water quality. We tend to have a lot of guest speakers at these events as well, so we'll talk about stewardship schemes as well and the England Woodland Grant Scheme, and just talk through how we know the indicators of a river and what they are, looking at the invertebrates in the river. And as Graham said earlier, we're very keen on having as much slurry storage as you possibly can. So we'll do also tours of slurry stores around the catchment. So here we have a perma-store, a tin tower, ringed, very expensive. Mix is lovely, but quite expensive. Here we were looking at slurry separators. And again, in the top left corner, we were looking at a farmer who dug his own lagoon and then had it lined. All of these comply to the SAFA regulations. Again, we do our midsummer farm walks looking at soil management, so the best we can manage soils to reduce the risk of pollution and soil wash. So here we have Des Kay, my senior catchment sensitive farm officer for the Midlands, in a hole as normal, and here we have Selwyn Richardson from ADAS, also talking about soil structure and how best to maintain that and improve your soil structure to reduce diffuse pollution. Again, we'll do talks around water treatment works as well. Here's one up above Tittersworth Reservoir, above Leek. And as Graham talked about earlier, we've done an awful lot of work in the Peak District looking at the white peat trials, where we've been doing different establishment methods for herbal lays that we'll talk a bit more about in the future. So here we have a nice herbal lay with a farm visit that we're all talking about there. And on the top right, we've got a direct drill, which we've had some very successful trials with establishing it through direct drilling. And again, here we have a herbal lay. You can see the red and white clover here flowering beautifully through our white peat trials as well. We also have drop-in centres at livestock markets. This is at Bakewell Market, where we're currently every Monday, and these will be put out through the whole of the region in time to come. Just a little talk about one of our biggest tools that we have that Graham talked a bit about earlier is environmental stewardship, going into mid-tier. We have already some great options for farmers through mid-tier environmental stewardship. So here you can see the new payment rate for enhanced overwinter stubbles of £469 per hectare. We don't push this one too much because, as my colleague Phil Gibson talked about it, it's essentially set aside with not amazing environmental benefits for us. But we are very keen on the next option on arable farmers of promoting is a 2-year legume fallow. Again, we pay £569 per hectare for that. Sadly, that can't be grazed, so that will have to be disked into the topsoil to increase organic matter. And you've also got the extra nitrogen there from the legumes before establishing the following crop. However, we are very keen to promote mixed farming throughout the East Midlands. So if you're an arable farmer and wanting to perhaps have a bit of livestock as well to balance up your farm, the legume and herb-rich sward, we're currently paying £358 per hectare, and that can be grazed and silaged through that. So you can use that for feed for stock. And again, talking about mixed farming, the bottom option, whole crop cereals. We're very keen for this on livestock farms to bring a more balanced farming approach to the farming. But particularly, we are paying the big money there, the highest rate, £554 a hectare. That is a spring-sown cereal with an overwintered stubble, but that is a high payment because we are very keen to replace maize silage with that option. We'll now talk about a little case study that I talk about most days with farmers. And I've called my little case study Holstein Holding. This is for a 100-hectare, 120 cow dairy unit, plus its followers. And the rotation here that we talk about, and we do have farmers doing this and doing very well. This is all for land that is registered as temporary grassland, as TG01 on your basic payment application. If you have 20% of your land in whole crop, and again, the whole crop can be wheat and peas, so it's got a legume in there, or some people like to go for barley, beans, and oats. That's your £554 a hectare. You rotate that round your farm, following it with 80% land in legume herb-rich swards, works out at £358 a hectare. So over that rotation, you will average a payment of £397 per hectare. So per year on that 100 hectares, that's your £39,700 a year. Plus your savings on bagged fertilizer at £700 a tonne is an additional £26,300 a year. So in summary, your payments plus your savings is £66,000 a year better off. You might not grow quite as much as you are now, but for £66,000, a lot of my farming customers are saying they can milk a few less cows and have an extra few minutes in bed in the morning. So something worth thinking about for the future. Now we're going to talk about where and when CSF. So for those of you who know, for the past 15 years, we've only really been working in these red priority catchments in your map. But on the 1st of April this year, we are moving over to the yellow areas as well. You'll see some white areas. We will also be working in those, but only working on air quality issues. But essentially, all the red and yellow areas to us are the same, and each one will have a catchment officer in it. Just a note here that we do work on a whole catchment approach. So even though the River Dove is the boundary between the East and West Midlands, all of the River Dove catchment is taken by us in the East Midlands, and the same with the Tame, Anchor and Meese catchments as well. When you look at the Defra's website, it will say Staffordshire is actually in the West Midlands, but the River Dove part is actually still in the East Midlands. And again, any interest in contacting CSF, the best thing to do is email us at csf.eastmidlands@naturalengland.org.uk. That is it.
Just waiting for the slides. While we wait for that to arrive, just an introduction. My name is Rich Reynolds. I'm from Anglian Water. I look after the agriculture team. So, there we are. I look after the agricultural team at Anglian Water and have evolved from where we initially started, very much focusing just on Metaldehyde, to the journey that we're going, looking further at a range of different other challenges and how we can work together with the farming community to get to the solutions that we need to get to. So a key thing for me to emphasize is that when I talk internally, we very much put farming at the top of that supply chain. So we're a water company, we rely on what comes out of the clouds, but that lands on agricultural land and either goes into the soil in groundwater, or if it runs off, it goes into the rivers. But either way, it interacts with that farming environment before it comes into our hands. So it's really useful and really important for us to spend time looking at what we can do to make sure that the water is in as good a condition as possible, both in terms of volume, but also in terms of quality. So investing in that farming community very much means that we don't necessarily have to invest in building new infrastructure and those sort of things. And in a world where sustainability and resilience is so important, it's really important to tie in those sort of things. As often that's the most effective way for us to get the best solution. So rather than investing in treatment works, let's invest further up into that catchment. And evolution, I think, that I've seen in the last 5 years is also moving very much from one buyer, one seller of services to partnerships, to linking up with supply chain, the sorts of things that we're asking, the sorts of things that we're challenged about, often with a slightly different interpretation, tying into all sorts of different areas. And I'll talk a little bit more in terms of the supply chain and how that links into what we're doing. So in terms of water company, our key drivers are water quality, and the water quality factors are the ones that often we've spoken about to you in the past. Pesticides, and we've mentioned Metaldehyde already, but that often's the central topic, especially for farmers in East Anglia. It was the one pesticide that, despite all the investments we've made in treatment, we weren't able to remove. But then there's a range of other pesticides that are also tying in, and there's been a lot of conversations around the suite of herbicides linked with blackgrass. Really important to emphasize, as a water company, we want farmers to have as many tools as possible to manage the challenges that you have. As a business, we particularly try and work on a business-to-business approach rather than other organizations in this area. So we very much look at what is the cost that you have for all the inputs that have washed off onto the land that we're seeing. So there's a business benefit for us on reducing what's lost off your land. It saves us money, it saves you money, the inputs that you paid to put onto that land. In terms of quality, things like nitrate have also become more and more topical, and those of you, particularly in Lincolnshire, might have engaged with us in terms of a nitrate conversation. And algae is starting to become more topical as well. So that whole conversation around phosphate, we have a driver for it, particularly to reduce the amount of algae that's around, which impacts the quality of the water that we're able to take. And in some stages can block up filters, block up reservoirs, and cause all sorts of problems. In terms of supply, we also have all sorts of questions that we're starting to move into in terms of flood mitigation, in terms of drought resistance, which weren't necessarily part of our immediate focus 5 years ago, but as our focus moves, it's evolving. And then our water recycling side, or what historically was called sewage treatment, we've got all sorts of challenges there. Nobody will be surprised to see the messages going through in the press at the moment. And we've got a range of challenges there, but it doesn't mean that all the solutions have to be invested at the treatment works. There are opportunities we'd like to think to invest in that farming community, in things that you're doing there that will help us. Essentially, what we want to do with catchment management is push more of the solutions out into the catchment rather than being focused internally. So in terms of our external engagement, in terms of our external engagement, we're talking around pesticides, around nutrients, and we do have a bit of conversation around livestock. So two examples of work that we've done. A lot of you will be familiar with our Slug It Out program that we ran, which was doing Metaldehyde product substitution. Sorry, these slides are bouncing around. Metaldehyde product substitution, where essentially we funded farmers not to use Metaldehyde. A really important distinction there. A really important distinction, because I think it's important that we focus on solutions rather than the problem. So we funded farmers not to use Metaldehyde. We had 250 farmers, 25,000 hectares over 7 years. And a really important thing that when you are looking to work with water companies or any other partners is understanding what good looks like. And from our perspective, we wanted Metaldehyde to reduce, but from a catchment management perspective, there are all sorts of other measures. Things like we wanted 100% uptake. We wanted farmers to engage, because the conversations we have now around Metaldehyde will evolve to other challenges that you're facing. So the slug problem is still going to be there, but blackgrass is a challenge. The products that you use in control blackgrass, particularly as products go off the market, means that there's more pressure on other ones that are around. We've had good spraying weather at the moment, so lots of people will have sprayed curb in the last week. If we suddenly get a huge amount of rain, that's going to tie in. So understanding what the impacts of those sort of things are really important. For us, in terms of the Metaldehyde trial, 100% uptake was really important, because it meant that what we were offering was applicable and was taken up by all the farmers. It was also important that we designed our trials in such a way that people weren't restricted to one option. I very much believe that the important people in making farming decisions are yourselves. So you need to have that flexibility to hit the sorts of things that we need, but in different ways. So while we funded people not to use Metaldehyde, we didn't say ferric phosphate was mandatory, and had 64% of the people in the trial at some stage trying different cultural controls. And a really important measure for me was that we had 13,500 hectares of farmers who voluntarily spread ferric phosphate outside the areas we were subsidizing. So important when we're looking at trials and going forward to see what good looks like, to look at the wider range. And a key thing for us is making sure that we can put a solution in place that doesn't mean that we need to be funding in perpetuity. The ideal solution for me is a solution that we can help you make some decisions on, but is economically robust, economically stable in the long run, because that allows us to not only support one farmer for a long time, but to move on to different groups. With over 1,000, well, with a lot more than 1,000 farmers in the Anglian region, we don't have the opportunity to fund everybody all the time. So being able to move through, put things in place is really key. Things that we also look to do, and we've done a lot more of it recently, are trials and demonstrations, very much believing that we would like to be investing in areas where you are asking questions as well. So are you looking at different cover crops, different varieties? Are there questions that you're asking that we can get learnings for that will help people in the future? Are there different crops that you're considering? So there's lots of talk around miscanthus at the moment in some areas. What can we do to kind of tie in and help and aid uptake of those sort of things? We're not necessarily going to fund huge areas, but if we can fund a proportional area, which allows you to have a decision on whether this is something you want to pick up and run with, those are the sorts of things that we want to look at. There's lots of talk around nitrogen at the moment from some of the previous talks, but slow release fertilizers are something that we've heard all sorts of different ideas around. And we'd certainly like to be talking to farmers on what their thoughts are there. Are there different additives? We talked about, well, say, ureas, enhancers, and those sort of things looked at. With the best one in the world, we see lots of marketing around it. To me, the best example is when we've trialed that on farm and you're, across the field, being able to say, actually, I can see the difference. I'm going to change. I'm going to use one product rather than another based on the things that we've got, things that we see. I think an area we will see far more of is also corporate funding starting to come in. So instead of just a one water company or one supplier funding things, we will have a number of different people in the market. We're doing some work around a project called Lens, working together with Nestle. Nestle have a corporate driver around farming and regenerative farming. We focused around water quality, and in this particular area in Northamptonshire, the council is also focused on flood mitigation, essentially looking at the same sort of actions, looking at the same farmers and saying, well, let's put all that money together and talk to a wider pool of farmers rather than everybody individually trying to get into that space. I've intentionally kept away from the world of carbon. I think there's definitely opportunities there, but at the moment, I call it a Wild West show. There's so many different unknowns in terms of what the restrictions, what the implications will be. I think in the next couple of years, this will clarify out, but I'm staying away from carbon at the moment because I think we can achieve a lot more with the corporate funding going forward. But yeah, it's a space to watch. So a very quick update from Anglian Water on the areas where we are. And I'm now going to hand over to Alex from Severn Trent.
Fabulous, thank you, whoever's cooking. Just a very quick overview. I'm going to go through natural capital approaches and the opportunities for farms within the Severn Trent patch. And then if there's time, I'll go through where we're working, the rep that operates in your area, and what's available and the current changes for 2022. Next slide, please. So what is natural capital? Well, this is basically natural capital is environmental goods. And from Severn Trent's point of view, these are catchment and on-farm measures that benefit the environment whilst maintaining or improving agricultural productivity. So if you take the farmland landscape that you see on your screen there, a fairly typical farmland landscape, fairly distinctive for Severn Trent's region, to be honest. And we've got a range of measures being implemented that are providing essential ecosystem services. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you've got hedgerows, which provide water quality benefits through nitrate and phosphorus uptake and runoff reduction and erosion reduction, as well as habitat connectivity and creation. The green patch near the top, we've got herbal lays, like what Bob was talking about earlier. These are reducing the nitrate leaching from the soil, as well as removing the pesticide risk. And then all the way through to, on the right-hand side screen, we've got livestock removal from these steeper slopes, and that's allowing that scrub habitat development. It removes the risk from livestock poaching, so we're getting a nitrate phosphorus reduction, and then we even get air quality benefits from that livestock removal. So this is just an example. It's not a real farm, but in essence, the more of these things that you have on the farm and the more of these that we have in the landscape, the bigger environmental gain. Next slide, please. And this is really summarized in this table. So we've got the catchment and the on-farm measures on the left-hand side column, and then we've got the ecosystem services that they provide across the top. And so basically, the more ticks that you've got, the bigger environmental benefits, and ultimately this makes you as farmers more eligible for more funding and money available. Next slide, please. So what does this mean for Severn Trent farmers? Well, at Severn Trent, we're trying to provide access to grants that can create these on-farm, this sort of landscape and provide these on-farm measures. So many of you will be familiar with our STEPS, so Severn Trent Environmental Protection Scheme for water quality and biodiversity. So these are grants for on-farm measures that will improve water quality or biodiversity. We've got Swap Your Nozzles, which is a relatively new scheme for us, where it's providing best practice training, and those who participate in the training will be eligible for low drift nozzles. And then we've got Farm to Tap, which is paying farmers to rewarding farmers for producing cleaner water quality coming off the land. And that was originally focused on Metaldehyde. And these really are our 4 flagship schemes, which target farm itself, and they sit alongside our specialist on-farm advice contract. Now we've also got 2 schemes which target these improvements at the catchment or the landscape level. So we've got Boost for Biodiversity, where this focuses on co-ops of farmers, as well as charities and other people in the community, bringing them together so that we can create these natural capital benefits at that catchment or landscape scale. And we've also got Commonwealth Trees, and this is a new grant scheme for us. So it's grants to help create 2,022 acres of new native forests throughout the Midlands. And that's part of our The Commonwealth Games, we're the carbon and nature partner of the Commonwealth Games. Next slide, please. Now, some of you probably wondering why bother? Well, if you take ELMS, the Environmental Land Management Scheme, they've got 6 overarching focus areas. Now, as an example, if you were to plant some hedgerows on your farm and you were offered a grant for those hedgerows from our Boost for Biodiversity scheme, those hedgerows would tick 5 of these 6 overarching focus areas. And that would make you eligible for the entry-level payment of the hedgerow standard of SFI. If you then took a step back and looked at where you could do other things, so maybe putting in some buffer strips next to those hedgerows and buffer strips that were paid for via the Severn Trent Environmental Protection Scheme water quality grant, then that would make you eligible for the intermediate payment of the hedgerow standard. And so really it's about these stackable benefits. Where can we get a little bit more another environmental good within your farm or the landscape, and blending the finance streams, private with public funding, so that you can hit the ground running when the ELMS pilots finish. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of Severn Trent perspective, you're probably wondering why we're bothering. Richard's covered a lot of it, to be honest. For us, it's about reducing the water quality risks in our catchment and creating these resilient catchments that we abstract water from. So for every £1 that we spend on catchment management, it saves between £2 and £20 on water treatment costs. But we also see around a £4 gain in those wider environmental benefits within the landscape. So this is really what these are. This is those resilient catchments that I said about. Some headline benefits here. So from the work that we've been doing with farmers and landowners, we've seen up to a 90% reduction in pesticides coming into our water treatment works, and a 70% reduction in peat erosion in our Upper Derwent catchment. So that's reducing the amount of colour coming into our water treatment works. We've also managed to avoid putting in any nitrate treatment at 5 of our groundwater sources and GAC at 1 of our surface water treatment work sources. So we're not just seeing the water quality benefits in terms of sampling, but we're actually avoiding capital expenditure on carbon and chemical heavy treatment options. And ultimately those costs don't go back to customers' bills. We've also created 4,600 hectares of new habitat across our region, and we're currently creating, well, we're actually in the planting season at the moment. We're planting 72 tiny forests. This is a slightly different focus. This is a tiny forest within urban communities. So we're bringing these green space, flood attenuation, carbon sequestration, biodiversity. These tiny forests impact all of these, and we're bringing them to urban communities to give them that access to green space as part of our Commonwealth pledge. Next slide, please. So I'm conscious of time, so I'm not going to go through these in detail, but on the screen now you can see the areas that we work in. We work with a lot of Wildlife Trust and Rivers Trust to deliver our catchment programme. If you go to the next slide, please. And in the East Midlands, we've got 7 agricultural advisors delivering the catchment programme. If you're not sure whether you fall within one of our catchments or who your advisor is, you can access the map on the Severn Trent website on the environment pages. Next slide, please. We've got quite a lot of changes coming up in 2022. Key dates for your diary are it's 1st of March, where Steps for Biodiversity is launching, as well as Boost for Biodiversity. Steps for Water Quality is launching on the 4th of April, and Commonwealth Trees pledge is open all year round, although obviously planting at certain times of the year only. Next slide, please. And just to quickly go over the changes and the grants available in 2022 is we're having a bit of an overhaul, to be honest. So biodiversity is the first one. Biodiversity Steps launches 1st of March. And many of the biodiversity options that we've offered before are now becoming priority items in some of our water catchments. So it'll give farmers more opportunity to access some of the other funding for non-priority steps items. For the main water quality steps that launches in April, we're overhauling the grant funding that we're offering. So there's going to be a general uplift across the board in terms of the grant money that's available, but with a particular focus on those priority items that will give us the biggest water quality benefits. And for those of you that have taken part in Farm to Tap in the past, we're not going to be offering that scheme this year, widespread across the region. And that's just because Metaldehyde has now been withdrawn. But we will be testing it out for propizamide in some trial catchments only. But details for this are TBC. Next slide, please. And I think that's me. Yeah, thank you for listening. I'll hand over to the Q&A session.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alexandra. Can I ask all the speakers to join me for the Q&A panel session, please? Are we all up there? Here we go. Okay, is everybody on? What I'll try and do is wade my way through quite a few questions here. Can we, what I'd like to do is just take a few questions about nutrients and the farming rules to water piece, and then I'll use Chairman's prerogative to actually give people a flavour of an update of where we think things are on that. Guidance in the spring has been talked about from Peter Gadd. That I know is going to come through, so I'll tackle that in a minute. But an interesting question about nutrient assessment of any type of organic should take full account of available nutrient rather than total nutrient in any analysis. Will this be essentially when any risk matrix is developed for future use? Please comment live, I was asked. Graham, are you able to tackle that one?
Thought you might ask me that one, Simon. Yeah, thank you. Hi, Pete.
Sorry about that.
On point as always. These sessions wouldn't be the same if you didn't come up with some interesting questions. So, yes, I mean available nutrients is the key. Basically, for those that might maybe a bit fuzzy on subjects, basically the available nutrient, i.e. nitrogen, for example, is equivalent to what it would be if you had the bagged nutrient. So for nitrogen, you normally have your 34% nitrogen, which is straight nitrogen, which is the available form of nitrogen for your crop straight on the ground. So the available in an organic material is that equivalent, and that is slightly different in that it's very much dependent in many cases, certainly with nitrogen, on weather conditions, ground, soil, etc. So you do need to be a bit careful. But yes, okay, of course, just on another point, high readily available nitrogen materials such as pig slurry and AD material, anaerobic digestate derived material, if it's above 30%, then there are closed periods that you have to consider for an MVZ. So yeah, so available nutrients is always the key to good nutrient planning. And if anyone wants to read up on it further, you can't do better than number 2, book 2 of RB209, which is also downloadable onto your phones and tablets and iPads via AHDB.
Thank you, Graham. Maybe we just need to tackle where we think we are with farming rules for water, and I'm going to use Chairman's prerogative here and give you a sort of NFU update. Obviously, following the regulatory position statement last year, there was in September an EA industry working group established where, as stakeholders, we all tried to reach a better consensus on the way forward. So that was sort of industry, regulator, water companies and other users. It's fair to say that getting traction on that was somewhat difficult. The key thing that we were pushing for as an NFU was the need to get a much more practical Rule 1. And there was a load of representation that went into Defra at that stage. Helped recently by the EFRA Select Committee hearing, but stakeholder industry letters to ministers, and eventually Stuart Roberts, as the Deputy Vice President, managed to have a meeting with Victoria Prentice. And I think in January, it'd be right to say we saw a shift in attitude. There was a new group set up called the Defra Guidance Group. Importantly, that's chaired by Defra. and is, by all accounts, working a lot better for the industry. We know that Defra want to issue new guidance in the spring. I saw that recently in a letter from Prentice to the new backbencher in Newark, Robert Jenrick. So that does confirm the same. And I understand the Minister is clear that she wants to find a way through that works better for the industry. So we know that guidance is coming in the spring, but we haven't yet seen a date for it. There is actually an ongoing, very rapid evidence call going on at the moment, which we're submitting into. So we expect to see something coming through in the next few weeks, which will be giving guidance to those for the autumn largely, in terms of how the farming rules for water matter progresses. So I just hope that one provides a little bit of reassurance that there's quite a lot of work going on at national level to get some sensible, pragmatic solutions out of the issue that arose last year. There have been a number of questions, I don't know whether any of the panelists are brave enough to answer these, about the sustainable farming incentive. What I was going to suggest is that people book in for next week's webinar, when we've got senior Defra people with us to probably answer all of those questions. But it's good to see that there's quite good to see from the polls that there's quite a lot of intention to uptake, even though we don't necessarily have all the details. James Brooke asks about Anglian Water. Do you have any plans, Anglian Water, to offer grant schemes similar to Severn Trent? Richard, that's one for you, I think.
Yeah, now that the challenge of Metaldehyde's moved away, we're kind of opening our focus up to a wider range of challenges. So yes, we will be offering grants. They will be in the same as Severn Trent does. We'll be in target catchments where we see a challenge and it can be addressed with farmers' actions. A lot of it is about how much we can achieve in a particular area. With some of our really big catchments, you know, it would mean millions and millions and millions to spend to get any measurable change. So the work we're doing at the moment is how can we work smart? How can we overlap with other people that are offering funding to get that measurable change that we need to do? Stuff we're doing at the moment is more focused on trials. So that first initial stage, I'd say Severn Trent is ahead of us in the things that they're doing there, but that very much is that intention. And looking forward, certainly in the next 3 to 5 years, we'll be doing exactly that same sort of thing. It will be in target catchments where we have specific challenges, but I think we're moving into a world where biodiversity and water quality and flooding all overlap more, so there's more opportunities for different parts of the business to be funding. So yeah, as a short answer, yes, but it's not going to be broad brush across everywhere.
Thank you, Richard. That's really useful. One I know it's probably been answered already, but it was a useful question that came up for Bob, and that's in terms of capital grants being available going forward. What are you able to give us a bit of an insight on that?
Yeah, so the capital grant scheme in our existing red catchments actually opens a week today on Tuesday. For anybody wanting to apply for countryside stewardship capital grants that need CSFO endorsement, they will have to contact their CSFOs, but it is very limited, and we're very focused on the right option in the right place, depending on what the pollutant is in that area. Then as of the 1st of April, when we go to almost the entire region, the yellow areas as well, that grant aid will still be open, scheme will open, but is all subject to engagement with your catchment sensitive farming advisor, and through the contact details that I put at the end of my presentation for the email address, which is on Defra's website as well. If you just search for catchment sensitive farming, it will give you a list of contact details for each region.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Bob. Interesting question coming in from Simon Mountjoy. Does the panel feel that there is the equivalent supervision and management of other sources of water pollution, sewage outfalls, industry runoff, and road drainage, etc.? And often things passed to me in meetings, so I'm doing the favours and passing it back. Who would like to have a go at that?
I guess the Environment Agency needs to talk about that one, does it?
Yeah.
I'll nominate Bob, but no. Well, it's a good question. I suppose in a way what I would say is, having been in the Environment Agency for too long, over 25 years now, is that agriculture actually is probably behind the drag curve on a lot of the work we've done in the past in terms of monitoring and also sorting out pollution issues. So yeah, I think we're basically on catch up, and you know that will probably, from guys and girls in agriculture, look at the moment or the last few years like maybe you're being picked on. You're not. It's effectively, we work on data, as does all good governance. We are tackling pollution issues across the board, but agriculture is one of those that is still causing issues. And as some of the slides showed, so there's a slide about the River Wye, Derwent catchment, which some of you may be seeing myself and my arts colleague shortly about. 40% of the pollution for phosphate is coming from agriculture. So we are now moving towards looking at tackling that. Pretty much the water companies have done virtually all they can now. They've done a really good job, especially at Bakewell Sewage Treatment Works. And we're also looking at tackling non-sewered disposal of sewage now through septic tanks, etc., leaky sewers, leaky surface water systems, other illegal discharges. So yeah, we don't just shine a spotlight on one particular industry at a time. We're looking at all equally. It's just some may feel like they're being picked on. That's not what we're doing. We go with the data. Hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Yeah, it's useful. So the sobering note there is that if agriculture's on catch up, there are more regulatory inspectors going to be around in the next couple of years to do that. Okay, we're nearly on time. Several of the questions that have been posed in the Q&A have been answered. Thank you to my colleagues, and I'm sorry if we've not got around to everybody, but I did promise to bring things to a close at 2:15, so keeping us all on time. So I think we've this afternoon had a very informative Green Futures 22 webinar. We will have available the slides from today, and there will be a recording for you on YouTube, and we'll send out details for those who have registered.